What's up, traders? Andrew O'Connell here with Pristine Capital. Welcome to your market recap video. It is October 11th of 2022. Another eventful day in the books, to say the very least. We actually had about half of these indices close green despite a big flush out in the morning. The S&P 500 finished down 0.63%. Our NASDAQ QQQ was the biggest loser, down 1.37%. IWM small caps actually positive 0.03%. Our Dow Jones was up 0.11%. Our ARK Innovation ETF, was the biggest loser, down 1.79%. And we can see that bonds were actually positive for today. Our TLT long-term treasury ETF finished up 0.44%. Volatility did expand across all of these indices. We actually had positive breadth in the small caps, which is pretty good. That's something we haven't seen in quite a while. We had an up volume of 43.3%, and the trend model remains at a -3 reading. In terms of today's economic data, we didn't have a whole lot. We did have these consumer inflation expectations numbers. They came out at 11 a.m., and they came in lower than the consensus expectation, or really the prior reading. So that is a good thing, expectations of lower future inflation, but that has to show up in the data. So tomorrow we're going to have our PPI numbers that are coming out. That is going to be huge. That is definitely going to be market moving. And in terms of some news events that we had today, we certainly had a bunch. Now you can see here breaking. Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, says that the emergency intervention in the bond markets will come to an end on Friday. He tells pension funds, which are heavily invested in UK debt, you've only got 3 days left now. You've got to get this done. And pretty much what happened is the UK pension system pretty much went insolvent. And I think they were using leverage, and basically they were trying to sell off their UK debt, the UK gilts, and there were no buyers for that debt. So essentially that's where we had like the BOE, like the GBP flash crash. The currency, fell to the floor, and these bond yields just started moving out to the highs. So the Bank of England has stepped in. They are propping up the pension system by basically saying like, hey, if you guys want to liquidate and sell your bond holdings, we will buy them from you. Essentially, it's basically just like we're turning the bonds into money at a good price. That way these pension funds don't take huge losses, more than they've already taken. But he's basically saying you've only got 3 days. Like if you want to sell your bonds, sell them now because we are going to buy. We're going to be done buying in 3 days. So I think they're intervening because they have to, but they're not starting like a whole QE program like, oh, we're going to buy this much every month, none of that. They're basically saying like, guys, we're intervening with this as like a one-time thing, like just this one time. So we'll see how that works out. But, definitely good that I guess we plugged up that hole in the financial system. And then Zelensky rules out talks with Putin. Talks may be possible with another Russian leader or in a different configuration. Now, this was definitely pretty jarring to see. We've had this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. It's been playing out for a couple months. The United States has been funding Ukraine. So essentially, we're waging a war with Russia, except we're using the Ukraine army. So we're basically, it's a proxy war. And I think, the goal is like cooler heads will prevail. But now we're having like, are we going to use nuclear weapons talks? There's been, Amgen, which sells some sort of drug that, will heal you if you are involved in like a nuclear event, something of that nature. A bunch of government officials bought that stock, and I think they secured like a bunch of it for themselves. And we're just playing like a high stakes game of poker here. And so like, it's interesting to see that this is the rhetoric, basically saying like, it's not like, oh, we want to get to a peace deal at any cost. It's like, no, we're going to put conditions on that peace. Like we want to overthrow Putin. So I think this is just getting to a crazy level. And, the people that are at risk are, the citizens. Citizens of the United States that are being put directly in the line of fire should something happen. Citizens of Ukraine, citizens of Russia. It's really like a high-stakes game of poker that is going on right now. In terms of the VIX Futures Curve, we are still inverted. This front month is higher than the following 2 months on the curve. So we're still in the heat of this vol event. Finviz Heat Map, we did see some selling. In the morning, it was basically like a panic flush in the market. Some bids ended up coming in. We had a nice afternoon rally. Then I think some of these BOE headlines came in, and probably just hesitation around the PPI tomorrow, to be honest. I wasn't really expecting like some big rally day today ahead of that event. But to be honest, at this point, I think it's better to just get it over with, because I really think there's a buyer's strike until investors, see what that data is. Like, there's just so much uncertainty that I think the last thing anyone wants is like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy ahead of the PPI and just get run over. So essentially, the running over is happening before the PPI is out. In terms of sectors, what were the leaders? We had retail up 1.1%. We had healthcare up 0.53%. We had biotech up 0.8%. And we had real estate up 1.11%. And pretty much, selling across the board otherwise. Style factors, we had the small cap value style factor was the leader, up 0.39%. That's pretty good. High div, low vol was up. Momentum was up. The hardest hit area of the market was high beta, down 1.87%. So we are still seeing we are certainly, I know there's people out there that are like, there's no panic in the market yet. And, we're basically seeing investors that are just going, I will sell at any price just to get me out of stocks, get me out of the market, get me out of harm's way. And it's just kind of indiscriminate. Like, you would think on a day like today, tomorrow, if this PPI report comes out slightly lower than expected, that could create a huge rally in the market. But no one is concerned about that. Like, all everyone is just thinking about is like, oh my gosh, there's so much pain in the market's going down, like, just get me out of this. And we've gotten to a point where, people aren't really thinking about that right tail in the market. In terms of trades, today I did put on a common stock position in Mara, which is a crypto miner. We got some news earlier in the day that Google, as part of their cloud business, they're going to be working with Coinbase, and they're going to be accepting Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I think these crypto miners really, as we exit this bear market, as we exit this recession, that is some of these areas of the market that were the worst places to be heading into this bear market, like the ARK Innovation ETF, cryptocurrency, high growth stocks, small caps. I think some of those areas are going to be really the best places in the market to be. Mara also has a very high short interest at 27.43%. So I added this one into the portfolio just in case we do get some better than expected PPI or CPI data. I think at this point, most investors, they're expecting a horrible print. And it's crazy because ahead of the last CPI print, this is where we got it right up here. The market rallied into the event really hard for 4 days straight. And then it went against what everyone was expecting. It came out hotter than expected. And that's really what catalyzed this death spiral in the market. Now here we are about a month later, and we're in the exact opposite place where the market's trading at a much lower level, and we did not have a rally into the event. We had a sell-off into the event. So now, no one's thinking about, well, what happens if it comes in lighter than expected? We could see, similar to this red candle, we could have one of those, but a green candle that just pushes us higher than anyone would have ever expected. But that is wishful thinking. The market is in a spot conveniently. It's at this perfect pivot point where we're trading right down to these prior lows from about a week ago. If we get some numbers that are just horrible, they're just way hotter than expected, it's tough for the Fed to get any more incrementally dovish without losing their credibility. Because they're so concerned about their credibility. That's all that matters now. And I think if the numbers come in lighter than expected, then the Fed can say, hey, we're being data dependent, and because the data is getting better, we can soften things up a little bit. But if the data comes out hot, the Federal Reserve is not in a position to do that. They have to wait another full month for the next backward-looking inflation report, and it's just very tough for the market. But yeah, so that is really the big trigger point for this week. We have the PPI report as well as the CPI. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ did finish to the downside today. It actually took out the lows from about a week ago. We did make a lower low on this close. We have a VPOC down here at around 10,560 for the NASDAQ. Could that get taken out? Absolutely. Russell 2000 is making a slightly higher low. As you can see, we almost tested the prior lows, but we ended up finishing off of them. We put in a green candle for the Russell 2000. And again, I do believe what the market is starting to price in. Like, remember the Russell 2000 topped out. It was a topping process. This was back here, February of 2021, where we hit our top. And it was at the very end of last year in November. We had like one more blow-off run. And then that was it. And the Russell 2000 started this downtrend in November. The Russell 2000, it's been in this downtrend for almost a year now. It's crazy to think that. Like, it's crazy to think we've been in a down sequence for a year. And so many investors out there, they're like, this is the beginning of the sell-off. Like, now is the time to get short, like a year in. And I honestly think as we're seeing this relative strength, because we already know, like, we're already in a recession, right? We already had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. And I believe most economists, they're saying at some point next year we're going to be in a recession. The market's always looking ahead. It's not looking to like the present or looking backwards. So I do think the next thing in the sequence is like either pricing the recession hitting its peak, which would mean like more downside, or pricing coming out on the other side of this. And so the Russell 2000 is showing some relative strength. Bitcoin is also showing some relative strength as well. And it's not like this is like, something overt, oh my gosh, just ripping out to new highs. But Bitcoin, of all things, is kind of just holding its ground at these levels. We did not make a lower low since June, and we are just kind of consolidating sideways. We'll have to see what happens. I think if we start to see some of these inflation reports get incrementally better, that's where we will see things like the small caps rip out to the upside, the ARK Innovation ETF, the crypto stocks, whatever. But I think at the end of the day, we need a positive catalyst. We either need some progress on Russia and Ukraine. I think that could really move things to the upside. That would solve a lot of our problems. We need some soft inflation prints. That would solve a lot of our problems. If we don't get any of those, and it does seem like we just remain in this death spiral scenario for now where we're just going to keep trending lower and lower and lower as the Fed continues to hike interest rates and as the balance sheet continues to roll off. So I think we're in a spot where most investors would agree we need something to happen here. So who knows? Tomorrow could be the beginning of that with this PPI report. But we will have to see what the river brings in the future. With that being said, that about does it for this market recap video. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll see you all tomorrow, as always.